Welcome back. We're in Ukraine now where, well, not directly in Ukraine though, but Russian President Vladimir Putin says he has a right to send troops into Ukraine, but hopes he will not have to exercise that right. He was speaking live on Russian TV after a clash in Mariupol, eastern Ukraine, in which 3 pro-Russian protesters were reportedly killed. Mr. Putin said he hoped the crisis would be resolved through dialogue. In the meantime, talks have opened up in Geneva between Russia, Ukraine, the EU and the US. That's a first since unrest erupted in the Crimea region.
Pro-Russian activists remain barricaded inside a local administration building in the eastern Ukrainian town of Slavyansk on Thursday, the morning after separatists flew the Russian flag on armored vehicles taken from the Ukrainian army. A Russian flag flew on top of the occupied building seized by the separatists as masked men stood guard behind piles of sandbags and a barricade made from tires. A banner showing the insignia of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic hung above the barricade. Separatists flew the Russian flag on armored vehicles taken from the Ukrainian army on Wednesday, humiliating a Kiev government operation to recapture eastern towns controlled by pro-Moscow partisans. The military setback leaves Kiev looking weak on the eve of a peace conference when its foreign minister will meet his Russian, US and European counterparts in Geneva. The meeting comes as the European Union and the United States contemplate more sanctions against Russia, with new measures from Washington possibly coming as soon as Friday. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary-General for Human Rights, Ivan Simonovich, told the Security Council on Wednesday that Ukraine is in danger of being destabilized by the current situation in the eastern part of the country.
Those who exercise influence over the situation should take immediate action to halt the violence. The arming of protesters and their transformation into quasi-paramilitary forces must be stopped. Anyone inciting violence and providing arms to protesters can be held accountable for the resulting tragic consequences.
It is the first UN report on the human rights situation in Ukraine since the crisis in that country began. Simonovich said that the next account will be presented on May 15. Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vitaly Churkin, responded to the report by accusing the commissioner of bias.
Those that drew up the report chose not to notice that the current authorities in the Ukraine became so because of an armed coup rather than civilized democratic elections.
With East-West relations at their worst since the Soviet Union collapsed more than 2 decades ago, Washington and the EU have expressed concern about the 40,000 Russian troops that NATO says are assembled near the Ukrainian frontier. Moscow, which seized control of Ukraine's Crimea region and then rapidly annexed it last month, insists the troops are merely conducting exercises.
Well, police in Argentina say they have rescued a 15-year-old girl who had been starved, beaten and kept in a garage for 9 years by her foster parents. A girl weighed only 20 kilos and said she had been fed only bread and water in her captivity. Her only company had been that of a dog and a monkey, and she said she was beaten with a belt if she tried to eat the leftover food thrown to the pets. Her carers have been arrested and charged with slavery and abuse. A teenager was found in the Argentine capital, Buenos Aires, by one of her biological sisters who had lost track of her. She'd been hospitalized and said she'd been out of the garage only twice in 9 years. According to officials, her foster parents took the girl into care provisionally in 2001 after a court found that her biological parents who had 7 more children were financially unable to look after her. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I am Amarachi Ubani. Sports News is up next.